Yeah, so, well, first of all, tell me, what is the super radiance effect for anyone who doesn't know this already?
Okay, so, gosh, it's the effect that's created by a group of specialist meditators. We call them TM Siddhas. So they started by learning transcendental meditation and then gone on to do a slightly more advanced program. It's also a good bit longer. So they might spend a couple of hours in the morning, a couple of hours in the afternoon, or even longer. But the super radiance effects comes from when there's a group of them meditating together all at the same time. And what we've discovered is that when they do that, they have an impact on the rest of society around them. And the larger the group, the wider and deeper that impact goes. So, you know, my hometown of Bournemouth, say, it's, you know, 500,000 people or whatever, we might only need about 80 people. The actual formula for predicting the effect is the square root of 1%. So we take 1% and square root it. So for Bournemouth, that's about 70, 80 people, if I remember rightly. And that's enough to actually have an influence on everybody else in the town. We can measure that very easily, because we can look at crime statistics, accident and emergency admissions, even insurance claims, all kinds of publicly available statistics tend to start moving in the right direction once we get the super radiance effect. It's almost instant. In fact, at one point, my slogan was "World Peace in 24 hours," because that's how long it'll take if we get the right number of people. And that's proven again because, okay, crime statistics and all the rest of it are take some time to collect. But when you look back retrospectively at the situation, when the Siddhas arrive in an area and start doing group program together, things start happening overnight. So, for instance, in war zones where we've been in the past to try and create a peaceful effect, the number of deaths goes down to sort of zero almost straight away, and that's within a day or so. I was on a project in Croatia during their civil war, with the split up of the Yugoslavia back in the 90s, and when we reached the square root of 1% of the Croatian population, fighting stopped everywhere, absolutely dead. And that day, Germany, I think, announced that they would support Croatia as an independent country, and everybody else fell in. All the other countries fell in shortly after that. And that created a structure for Croatia, which they then have built on. And the fighting, although after we left, the fighting resumed for a while, but it was in a much smaller scale, and it sort of petered out naturally. So these things happen very, very quickly, and they're very measurable, and they're very predictable. So that's why we say it's very scientific. So although it's quite controversial in terms of how does this work, well, people do know, but they've got their own theories and speculation, things like that. The evidence is completely cast iron. It's absolutely rock solid. And I started looking at their 1%, the earliest studies. They're beautiful. I mean, it's like Maharishi predicted that if we can get 1% of a population to meditate, you know, it'll start to transform society. So there was a wave of teaching in America in the early 70s. So a couple of guys realized, wow, we must have one or two towns now that have got this 1% effect. So they came across 11 that had taught at least 1% of the population. So they ranging a population of between 20 and 50,000 or something like that. So they took statistics from every town in America in that population band, and there were 101 cities, of which 11 were these. And sure enough, what happened was all the 11 collectively had come down a bit, and all the other 90 had gone up in terms of crime. And then when they took 11 of the 90 and match them with the 11 that had learnt to meditate in terms of age of population and college population, one or two other things. They try, and geographic location. So they would try, they found the change was even greater. But in some cases, two cases, crime had gone up 20% in one of the other two towns, and in one case it had gone down 15% in the meditating town. I said, God, you don't need more than that. Okay, so it's a one-off experiment. So let's try another one. So they did another one, and they do another one. The other one had 48 towns, I think, in it that were meditating. Yeah. And it's just.
I mean, the results are there, isn't it? The evidence is there. It's
just people can't see it, so that's a shame. And then there was the Jerusalem study, where you saw that one where the numbers in the program were going up and down, up and down, up and down, and it matched entirely the number of war deaths going on in 11. It's just peach.
Yeah, it's crazy. Wow. I mean, it's just so obvious, and it's right there in front of our eyes. It is the easiest thing that anyone can do. You don't need any guns or
yeah, that's right. That's right.
It's just meditation.
That's right. That's right. There's not just one study or two studies or half a dozen studies. There's about 50 studies done around the world, and also laboratory tests. So we can actually measure a TM siddhar when they're meditating has improvements to their brainwave coherence. So, okay, if they're having an effect on the rest of the population, then what you might think is then the rest of the population will register changes as well. So they've, on a national project in America, they were checking other non-meditators, I think, 2,000 miles away, and every time the people in Iowa, in the center of America, every time they meditated, these people's brain waves started to become coherent at the same time. So it really is that, and it's like flicking on a light switch. You can rely on it. It's absolutely rely on it. And I suppose, in a sense, without even realizing it, became to rely on it, because I remember the Croatian one particularly. It was, if you remember the Bosnian conflict, do you? Have you heard Bosnia and the Serbian conflict and the rest of it? They were terrible. Croatia was going that way. It was actually the first sort of civil war that erupted in the Balkans. And it was looking to be really bad. And I remember a fax coming through saying, Croatian TM movement would like people to go over there and meditate and support. They were training up their own siddhars, you see. So I just thought, great, that'd be a good wheeze. So off I went. And it was really only when we got to the border between Italy and there was a small group of us coming from England, about 15 of us, I think, in a little minibus. We were just crossing the border. It only began to dawn on me then that actually I was driving into a war zone. But so, I thought, oh gosh. The car in front was stopped. The border guards were there, all heavily armed, and the guy in front of us was stopped, and he got out of the car, and we could just see them waving their arms about and things like that. And he opened his boot. It was just full of guns, absolutely packed with guns. And the guys patted him on the back and, gave him the thumbs up. So off he drove. And then we drove up, and he said, well, why are you coming to Croatia? He said, we're tourists. He tapped his head and told us to go on. So we arrived at the hotel, and all the lights were out because they were expecting an air raid. Being a civil war, everybody knew everybody else, so phone calls were made and things like that. So they're expecting an air raid, and we just went straight into what we call our program room and did our program. And I think there were about 20 towns that were bombed that night, but not our town. It was okay.
Coincidence or?
Absolutely coincidence. A lucky coincidence, actually. So, and we were in a garrison town as well, a naval garrison town. So it was a target, it was a strategic target, but it somehow somebody forgot to drop bombs on Pula that day. So, and the whole time we were there, not a shot was fired in our town. And the Navy, it was the Yugoslav Navy or the Serbian Navy, the Federal Navy, gradually pulled out, and there was nobody left in the garrison by the time we left. So it just just stopped. And as our group grew, we hadn't got the Croatian Super Radiance number there. I can't remember how many people it was, about 300 people. So we were still only 50 or 60. But as it grew, I kept a record actually of the events going on, and bit by bit the fighting stopped in a wider and wider circle away from us until we finally hit the super radiance effect for the whole country.
Wow.
I remember the BBC announcing there was no fighting in Croatia today. You know, whoopee, big achievement. And,
but I bet they failed to mention who, because of who.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. There were all these guys with white helmets rushing around, and actually in our hotel, and you know, they hadn't a clue what was going on because we'd all shuffle off into the meditation room and close the doors and be total silent for the rest of the day. You know, I mean, we'd spend all day meditating in a situation like that. You know. You don't feel safe doing anything else, to be honest. So,
yeah, I can imagine. And that's pretty brave to go into a country that's, you know, there's war going on, and you kind of
well, I think that's why I told the story, because it wasn't bravery at all. It was just matter of fact, that it is so matter of fact that when we do it, it works. So it's almost like, you know, if you're going to cross the road, it is dangerous to cross the road, so actually you do look, you know, left, right and left again, and only walk across when it's clear and it's perfectly safe. That's just matter of fact. It's not a magic thing or a you know, coincidence or whatever. I didn't get hit crossing the road, how fantastic. Well, it's because you took precautions. Well, the precaution is you meditate, and if there's enough of you, everything's fine, everything's absolutely fine.
That's really powerful. And that's, I mean, so have you guys ever, did you at any point try to present these statistics, these, you know, what you were doing to the governments there? Or
only about 1,000 times, I would think. All over the world, they're just not listening. So it's just completely beyond. I remember in the hotel where we were staying in Croatia, there was a guy there who was reading a book, and he was in the foyer, and he was sort of always hanging around, and I asked him where he worked. He said, I'm in the Foreign Office. And basically, he was a spy, you know, British. He worked for the Foreign Secretary's private office, or whatever it was, which is sort of, you know, that. So he was from MI6 or whatever it was. He hadn't a clue what was going on. He was reading a novel. You know, he was waiting for something to happen, and of course it didn't. So he left. But you know, it's they can't hear it. And I mean, I touch on that in my book. Actually, it's to do with the brain's way of filtering out information, that we rely on our beliefs to be able to process information. And where the evidence, shall we say, the facts of the situation conflict with our beliefs, our brain actually filters out the facts. And it's called confirmation bias. And it's very common. In my management work, I come across it with managers thinking that they're running a business in a particular way, but they're evidently not. But they can't see that because their belief is that I'm a jolly good manager and everyone loves me and I'm do the best I can. And so it happens in every sphere of life. So when you get to something that's as weird as this, in the sense that, you know, we're not used to telepathy, although it's not telepathy, but we're not used to this sort of broadcast effect. It also isn't part of our sensory perception. And of course, we rely on our sensory perception. You know, we can see one another, so we know each other's exist, you know, but if you can't see this, you can't smell it, you can't taste it, you've never heard about it before, and all sounds rather strange, it's much easier to just ignore it or disbelieve it or laugh at it, which is what they do. But I don't think it excuses them these days, because they're actually paid quite large sums of money on an annual basis to look after our interests. And it's really time they started looking at the evidence and saying, right, okay, although I don't believe it, why don't we give it a go, you know?